I don't know about all of you, but I am deeply invested in my Halloween costume for this year. And yeah, I'm an older guy, but I still do it, and I put a lot of work into it. Halloween costumes have their own kind of immersion, much like we talk about getting into when we play a tabletop role-playing game. Immersion is a kind of investment. It's an investment in a space that you normally cannot go to. So at this time of year, we're putting on that costume. We're finding ourselves emboldened or sort of lifted by the anonymity, the ability to go deep inside. So here we are. And we're talking about how we can get into that space a little bit more deeply by making your game a little scarier. So check out this podcast today. We got some cool stuff for you. See you in a bit. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your weekly Dungeons & Dragons and TTRPG podcast, where every week Rich, Garret, and I pick up a subject around the culture of gaming and discuss it with you. So without further ado, sharpen up those daggers. We're going to get started right now. All right, so should we get this conversation started?
Yar!
Oh my God. All right, you guys, we're back here again on another Sunday morning, and I'm gonna tell you, I went to see 20-Sided Tavern yesterday, and it was a fucking blast. It was so much fun, and I don't mean to lead off with something about me, but this is the highlight of my weekend. I got to meet Abria Iyengar. It was fucking fabulous. So I'm just gonna put that out there. You guys got to go see it.
Very jealous.
Yeah, I'm jealous. It's now, hearing about this a couple of times from players at our table, and now it's just like, I want to go.
Me and Garret are going to go together.
Oh, we're going to go.
Yeah.
Let's go, Rich.
I mean, theatrically speaking, it's a unique experience. If, they're breaking the fourth wall, the audience is involved in a lot of the decision making, all that good stuff. It felt weirdly Shakespearean on some level. And it just had this kind of, that turn to the audience just felt right. It just felt good. I enjoyed it. So,
hell yeah.
So we have a comment to read about last week's podcast that I'm excited to get to because I spent a lot of time this week thinking about last week's podcast. And that podcast was on, the notions of the immersiveness of theater of the mind versus things that we tend to find distracting, like possibly minis, possibly maps. And I'm just going to put this out. Well, let me read the comment first. All right. This comment comes from rabbit.com, who is a regular in the chat rooms of things like Faint Divinities. And whenever we're live, rabbit.com never fails to be there. So we love rabbit.com. I took an excerpt out of this comment because it would be too long to read. It had a lot of thoughtful input in it, and I really appreciated every bit of this. But I am just going to pull out this one excerpt, and that is, they start off with, as per my comment to Open World Addict Zero, I don't know what it is about my brain, but I kind of need some kind of map if there's any kind of combat. What is within range, and what is within that? Like, if player X casts this ability, how many are within their range? If a fighter is meleeing with two enemies, what exactly are they and where someone else, so they're going into things like area of effect. It says, when someone else does an area of effect attack, who does it hit? I don't know. Maybe it's just getting more familiar with keeping track of stuff in my head. I haven't been able to play or GM in forever, but currently my brain kind of needs it. And immediately that clicked for me as saying, I'm a teacher. I understand there's all different modes of thinking, all different brains out there. And here I am trashing a tool that's like critical probably to a lot of people's play. Bad move on my part, and I apologize for that. But what do you guys think?
I think that, last week it was very specific to our game and our preferences and all this kind of stuff. And we could have led with that a little bit more. I think to just let people know, like, hey, your game is still super valid and a wonderful way to play. But this is just what works for us in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, we're putting opinions out there, Rich. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I still, and I believe I touched on this on the podcast last week, I still like a map from time to time, especially when it comes to like a tactical combat, which I think, what the comments are saying about area of effect or who's in this area and stuff like that. I mean, I can agree with them. I like it.
Yeah. And I think another thing I kind of got a little bit put off by in my own commentary was this, my love of minis. So I think, all right, here's what I'm going to chalk this up to. Am I going to make an excuse for myself? Well, it is 2024, and that's what everyone does. And then I'll backtrack it a little bit and take some responsibility. So don't worry, I'm a grown up. I try to practice wisdom as part of my I'm a little older, so I try to get the wisdom in there. But I probably was a little deficient in B12 because I kind of went off the vitamins for a couple of days. So maybe I was just having a moment where I was losing my mind. But I also probably got a little bit caught up in trying to find content for the podcast that I like how our content becomes things that we're both experienced in, thinking about in that moment, and potentially going to try. I really want to get into, we're doing a lot with Daggerheart now. Daggerheart is all about storytelling and immersiveness in theater of the mind. And I think my mindset was firmly planted in Daggerheart at that time. And I'm just like, let's get rid of all the minis. Not what I intended to really say there. So there.
I think you're okay because we're going to recast you anyway. I think it's going to be fine.
Right. Wow. Well, Rich is always firing me.
I don't know. I honestly say it's your game.
Yeah.
Play it the way you want to play it.
That's right. If something works for all of you out there, and you know what, today's podcast that we're talking about, we're going to talk about a lot of that. We're going to talk about how your game might not abide by something we're going to say. So let's talk about how maybe if your game takes place in this kind of scenario, or if your game utilizes this kind of play space, what can you do? So maybe this is a good point for us to jump right in and talk about other people's games.
Let's jump in.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So today we are talking about, in the spirit of the month of October and a whole bunch of events coming up. Yeah, thanks for that little moan. So we got Dios de los Muertos coming up. We've got following, of course, Halloween. So it is a time of year when we see the approach of death. We see the approach of the spirit world coming for us as the leaves fall from the tree and winter looms. And so we're supposed to don our masks and costumes and shake a finger at death and say, no, death, not today. You're not coming for me. And, if in all of that you decide you want to, scare off the spirits by dressing up like, a Starbucks pumpkin spice latte, well, I'm not sure how that's going to work for you.
It might work. I don't know. Modern day capitalism is scary.
Well, if they put the price tag on their costume, then it might scare the spirits away. They're like, I'm not paying $8 for a coffee. Anyway, so we're talking about how to make your game scary. Building tension, building suspense, making the game a little scary. Working on a horror campaign? Cool. Let's get down with that because I think that's going to be useful right now.
Oh, hell yeah.
Absolutely. So we went out and we did some research. We looked into a lot of the games that we love, pulled out some of the mechanics from those so that maybe you could bring them into your tabletop RPG of choice, whether that's D&D or Call of Cthulhu or whatever it is you decide to play. And then we got some other ideas. So what do we got, you guys? Like what hit you? What struck you as being a great mechanic that could be pulled out to make your game scary?
Garrett, why don't you start?
Oof, me. Okay. Well, let's start with Shadow Dark. We haven't played this yet. New RPG, TTRPG out. Todd brought it to the table. We just haven't had time to play it yet.
Yeah, bought the game.
It's more of a very simple, broken down rules type game. It should be easy to get into. One thing that I love, you want to try it out? They have a free playtest set up on their online that you can download and try. But what I love about it is very dark. No one has dark vision, and everything revolves around torches, which is a timer mechanic in the game. That you have a very limited amount of stuff that you can carry. You're very prone to dying. I think just something like that, just being a very dark atmosphere,
Yeah. And it utilizes like the survival mechanics. Like, all right, we're going into this dungeon. What can I carry? What can I bring to make sure we get out of there? And that's kind of something that doesn't particularly exist in D&D or most other RPGs in a sense. And it's scary to be like, all right, we got a plan for this.
Right. Well, it exists, but it's not focused on. Right. And I think one of the things that's cool about the basic underlying philosophy of this game is it's about limitation. Right. And so you have 4 classes that you can be in this game. They've really sort of carved down the character sheet to be about the bare necessities, and you have limited equipment slots. I'm gonna say that what I love about Shadow Dark is that game time is real time, right? So if you have a torch, which you have to light to be able to see, to do what you're doing in this game, you start a timer on that torch. That timer's 1 hour. So in that hour, when that torch goes out, things get bad, right? That's the first thing. So immediately there is this sense of pressure of time, which I think is fantastic.
Oh, for sure. And on top of that, like the game itself is designed to be deadly, right? Your characters are, in a sense, more vulnerable, a little bit weaker, and the enemies are a little bit stronger.
Yeah. And so when you have several sets of pressures pushing down on the character, that, of course, is automatically going to raise the bar. Now, personally, this is just me with that game. I would want there to be some kind of investment for the player in that character so that the pressure was even greater, right? Because I think one of the things that drives us to fear our characters dying is our love of the character. So if it's a quick build, so there's this Shadow Dark phenomenon that's out there right now that I've actually been reading about. It's built into the book, and it's called a Shadow Dark Gauntlet. And it's a game that can be quickly made by a GM, where through a series of rolls and looking at tables, you can decide on the size of a dungeon crawl, the danger level of a dungeon crawl, and then the players come to the table with 3 or 4 player characters that they're going to play through as they go through this dungeon. When one dies, pull out the next one. I love this game. I love this idea, but I think the problem with it is, if they're not fully invested in that character, like a love of the character, is it really scary when they die?
I don't think so. Like sometimes maybe the initial scare is scary, like a jump scare. But like as an investment, like if you're not really worried about this character not achieving their goal or something, then like them dying is more of like an man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or like I lost one of my lives type thing, like
right.
a video game.
So I think this kind of pressure, this kind of tension of time is probably bigger than that, because obviously if it's all based on the time of the torch burn, right, then that's going to be the scramble. Now you guys were talking about another game that uses the similar mechanic.
Yes, along with this, you can go to a game like 10 Candles, where the game itself is all a countdown. It's all limited time, and it's all run by 10 lit candles around the center of the game.
This is actual candles.
This is actual 10 lit candles, and they're lit at different times during the process of setting up the game. So it's a zero prep game. The DM and the players come with no prep, right? And as they're setting up the game, building their characters and everything, you light certain amount of candles. And then as these candles go out, quite like the real-time torch mechanics in Shadow Dark, things get worse, right? Let's say one of the candles goes out. That means that the players now end that scene that they're in and move on to the next scene with higher stakes in a sense.
Right.
And also along with that, at the beginning of the game, it's a momentum shift because the players have as many dice in their dice pool as there are lit candles. And as the candles go out, they lose dice, and the DM or the GM has as many dice in their dice pool as unlit candles.
Oh, so the GM grows more powerful as the candles go out. Mm-hmm. Nice.
That's interesting. Yeah. I like that. Mm-hmm. And then that starts shifting, the stakes, I guess, towards, the GM side.
The things you want to do get harder as the stakes get higher.
So I would make an argument here for if you want to. So this to me seems like the physicality factor. I'm really excited by the 10 candles mechanic, and it's the physicality of the candles themselves at your table. You are watching those candles burn down, and when one goes out, it's right. It's not like a timer on a torch like in Shadow Dark, because even if I have that timer running, like say on an iPad or a phone next to me here, and it's sort of like I know when my torch is going to run out. It's different than seeing the candle physically snuff out.
Yeah, because along with it being like just a game mechanic, it's atmosphere. You play that game with just a candle-lit place in front of you.
And I'm going to guess that as they're going out, you're aware of the fact that the room is getting darker.
Mm-hmm. And the pressures and everything are closing in around you.
Oh, man.
Right? That to me is so exciting.
Could you imagine if we were playing in our space? You know, we play in the basement. It's like our mini dungeon.
And it's dark.
And only the candles are lighting our area.
Oh my God.
And they start going out.
Dude, the anxiety we'd be feeling, we'd be crawling over each other.
That alone it's horror.
And let me tell you how they bring it to like a cascading finale, right?
Okay.
So in the beginning of the game during creation, everyone does a voice memo of their character's last words because no one survives in 10 candles. And as the game ends and the room's entirely black, the GM plays each voice recording as the characters die.
Get the fuck out of here.
My God.
100%.
We got to try this.
Oh my God. I think, okay. I want to play this game.
Me too.
I'm drawn in. This sounds really cool.
And everyone's just sitting in darkness.
Oh, I
listening
love
to them.
that. But, and I'm going to talk in this podcast about things like sound I want to bring into the game and sound effects and music. Can you imagine when you've got all of those things bringing that together?
Terrifying.
Okay, that sounds like a terrifying game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Combine that with something in like D&D or Call of Cthulhu, whatever you're playing. Oh my God.
Yeah, just bring that over. It's like have 10 candles, right? And I'm not sure exactly when they're lit, but maybe you have 10 candles that are of varying lengths so that they're going to burn out in time. It might be tricky. You might have to play with that and try and figure out, get to know how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
But once you perfect that, that could be gold.
Yeah. That's so cool. I was even thinking maybe like, let's say you guys are teleported to this place in your campaign for whatever, like a dungeon or something. And the candles represent like how long you can be there. So like as soon as they all go out, maybe you're like teleported back to where you're from or something.
Right.
Just to keep the time limit aspect of it.
Right. Well, countdown timers or some kind of looming danger. And that's really what this boils down to, right? Is the looming danger gets under people's skin, I think. So when the looming danger finally appears, maybe it exists as a simple, all right, now the danger level goes up. Rather than rolling for a random encounter every 15 minutes or every 10 minutes, I'm going to roll every 5 or every 3 or every 1. And that's kind of a Shadow Dark mechanic there. Yeah. Like as the danger level goes up, you're rolling more frequently for these encounters, as well as having disadvantage on rolls, et cetera, et cetera. It gets really hard really fast.
Can you imagine like if when we were playing Strahd, we're in like his castle or something, and as soon as all the candles go out, he like appears or something in the darkness.
Right.
Like you turn on your like deep voice modulator and just speak in the darkness. Oh my God.
Yes, I love that.
Speaking of Strahd, we played through the Strahd campaign.
What we got it for a year and a half, 2 years?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Once a week, year and a half or so.
Yeah.
I think talking to Todd as the DM, I think you did an amazing job scaring the shit out of us multiple times in that campaign.
Thank you.
There's definitely points in that, but I think it's also some of the things you brought to the table that you're going to mention: sound, environment. It set us, and I know Rich, you played. There were times where it was just like, holy shit, this is like a horror scene.
Oh yeah. We're like, we're going to die. Can we huddle together and just poop ourselves?
Well, I found myself so invested in that campaign on such a deep level. And when I knew, and so no spoilers here for any people who have not played Strahd yet, but this will not be a spoiler. But there was a moment in the game when the party is invited to dinner at Strahd's castle, and you guys went. And I knew this was coming. So we ended on your kind of getting ready to go in to the dining room to sit down to dinner. That's where we ended. And then I knew I had a week to prepare. And I turned the house into the interior of Strahd's castle. I set our dining room up. Candles, candelabras, crystal, pewter plates. I even had my wife and my neighbor come in to function as two of Strahd's wives. They prepared meals. We ate. The tablecloth was red.
Yeah.
There was an actual physical human skull, an anatomical physical human skull on the table. Like we had it all. We had it all.
Todd spent the week murdering someone and then taking their skull and cleaning it. And
and getting all of those microorganisms to get all the flesh off in time for the thing was really difficult.
It was tough. You did great.
Thank you.
I think this brings in one of our next points that, you can use the environment around you, right, outside of the game and outside of the table to make things scarier. Like you were talking about before this. What if you just had a friend of yours walk by the window right behind a player?
Yes.
Or something.
Well, so the reason we brought that up as we were talking was we know that you, the listener, might be playing D&D or your TTRPG with your friends in, say, the kitchen of your house or the dining room. You might not have a dedicated space that you play in. Great. That's totally fine. So what can you do to that space to make the room more environmentally conducive to this kind of fear? Well, one, shift your lighting. All right, let's get out of the normal mode of lighting in the room and let's get it dim. Does that mean getting a few smart bulbs from Amazon that might function with an app with your phone? Possibly. If that's something you can afford and you want to put that in, great. That can be used to just all of a sudden change the room to red or start off really dim and dim blue so it seems like it's nighttime. Okay, maybe you don't go that route. Maybe you go straight candles, right? But Rich, what you're talking about here is if there's a window, and you can get someone who's not playing in your game to just sort of do something outside that window to kind of heighten the, what the fuck was that? Did you guys see that outside the window? That could be gold. That could be gold.
Oh, for sure. Or let's say maybe the characters have to find something in a room. You can actually hide that thing in the room and have the characters get up and go look for it like a scavenger hunt.
Yes.
Or outside in the dark or something.
I think this goes back to the candles and the physical components, the physical reality of the game.
Yeah.
Right? I think as kids, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think as kids, we all wanted to make our houses into haunted houses, and get your mom and dad to go through the haunted house and you do that kind of stuff. I did. This is kind of like that. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of respects, we all kind of live. We live for this game because I think we still love, make-believe, which now we're just really freaking good at it. And
I have an interesting point that just came up in my mind. I kind of want to bring it up to you guys.
Do it.
Last week we were talking about how the physical stuff can be distracting and how everything in our mind is better. And this week we're talking about how, oh my God, bringing it into the physical real world, it makes it so much scarier. We look like a couple of hypocrites, don't we?
I'm going to argue that we don't.
We're talking strictly right now. We're talking more of immersive elements, location elements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Candles, lighting, sound.
Yeah.
Which still gets your imagination running wild.
I think all those things help.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we were talking last week a little more of a distraction while playing the game itself, like a combat scenario.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be distracting.
Because I think the goal here when I say the physical components are the thing that make the game compelling, like the candles, say, or going on a scavenger hunt in the house you've turned into a haunted house, that is more immersive. You have an opportunity at that point to be that character in that space.
If we get that wax sealed letter which we did at one point. That is an element that I think brings you in.
Agreed.
It doesn't distract you.
Agreed.
I gotta say this, whenever I see people on TikTok, like DMs on TikTok that make these like handmade beautiful books that are like parchment, that's stained parchment with maps and notes, like an old journal, burnt corners, and they're gonna be giving that to their players. I'm like, God, I want to have the time to make that thing for them. I really want to just be able to like, hand it out to them.
Yeah. Okay.
That to me makes the game really special. It really gives the game a flavor. Agreed.
Totally agreed.
I do want to talk a little bit about sound, and I want to offer up some options for sound for players. So can we just take a break? And in that break, maybe we'll offer up some ways that you soon will be able to become a member of our channel, support us, so we will have time to make those tomes. That'd be nice. But let's take a break. We'll come right back. Hey, esteemed listeners. Listen, if you like what we're up to today and you like the content that we produce here at Wither and Bloom Studios and what we talk about on iCast Guidance, today's request is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to subscribe. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to go over to Patreon and support us. Today, I think I'm going to just ask you to share the word. Tell people that we're out there. Tell people that this podcast exists. Tell people that Wither and Bloom Studios are putting together a good thing. I see comments on our channel all the time that we're underrated, and we really want to grow. We want to talk to more people. We love getting into a bigger community, and I feel like you all can help us do that. So do me a favor this week. Tell a friend we're out there. See if you can get someone to listen. It'd be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back from the break, and we left a second ago talking about notions of sound and getting your game more immersive and more spooky in terms of sound. Now, listen, I know that all of you are probably going to be coming at this from a whole host of different abilities in terms of sound. You might have a phone that has a headphone cable that runs out of it to a Bluetooth speaker, or maybe just even you have a Bluetooth speaker. You might be working on something much more complex. But let's just kind of talk about this a little bit, because I love immersive sound. I love it. So can I jump right in, or do you guys have something you want to throw in?
I mean, the only comment I would say is in the games that we've played, the sound definitely helps with the immersion.
You have tortured us with sound.
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And I don't want this whole part of the podcast to be about, hey, you got to go out and spend a lot of money on sound stuff to get you there. I think that most of us have some version of some kind of sound system in our home that we can work with, even if it's just that Bluetooth speaker. But let me start with an interesting one that I think is really kind of cool. And that is, let's say you're one of those Amazon households you have the Alexa dots all over your house, okay? So you can go into your Alexa app on your phone, and I've done this before. You create a routine. And when you create a routine, you're basically saying, when this happens, this happens. Now, if you want to invest about $20 on Amazon, you can buy what's called an Echo button. It is a little panel of buttons. So for $20, you can get 6 buttons, and that hooks up to your Alexa system. And in your Echo routine, you can say, when I press this button, the following happens. Cool. So you can get a dot, one of your Alexa dots, in a room like upstairs to play a scream or a floor creak or a sound when I discreetly press a button behind the DM screen. And they can be spatial because you're setting them off in other rooms. It could be one right at your table, of course, if you wanted it to. But I also like this idea where we're turning the house into something bigger, right? Where sound is coming from different locations. So that could be gold right there.
That's terrifying.
Right? So your Bluetooth speaker could be playing the general ambient sound, like winds blowing, some thunder and lightning crackling here and there. And then all of a sudden, you've got your own little soundboard here for $20 that you picked up on Amazon. Not bad, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. I've only done that on a certain simple level with Amazon routines. I don't have an Echo button or any of those, but I found those and thought, oh, this could be cool.
Oh my God.
So prepare yourselves for that in the next game.
Can you imagine that? Like in the other room, we just hear a scream.
I'm just thinking about when we were doing that straw dinner, if you had a scream go off in the distance.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that. I'm getting chills right now.
Because even when like we have the sound system in our own room and we hear like creaking in the floorboards, we're creeped out.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if it actually came from above us or something? Oof.
Well, and the way I got there was I picked up an old Sony theater surround sound receiver unit at a yard sale for, I think it was $30. It really wasn't that expensive. And it happens to have multiple outs for speakers. And all it needs is one in to run an iPad or your computer. And all of a sudden now I've got sound all throughout the room because I've got 4 speakers in the space. And, I used to make my own speakers, so I do have 2 big subwoofers under the table, which brings me to my next point. And that is about bass. Bass, if you have it, if you can acquire it, if you have a subwoofer that you can hide in your space somewhere, when the mood gets dark and the tone goes low, feeling that in the floor or in your chair is gold.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? It's gold.
Oh my God.
It fills it out. Like you feel that in your body.
Ooh.
And your body responds to those resonances. So that's going to be effective.
Yeah.
Right? Now, where am I getting my sound from? Like when we're doing these games, where is it coming from? Now, as you all know, we're big fans of this new app called Pocket Bard that's starting to emerge. It's gaining some traction. It's got all kinds of sliders built into its mood sets and its sound sets, and they are just building and growing day by day by leaps and bounds. And we love them, so we use them all the time. But I want to be equitable here and talk about some other things so that, people have choices to make that, if they're not really connecting with Pocket Bard, what else can they use? Well, the other big one that everybody uses out there is called Sirenscape, which I used for quite a long time. Sirenscape probably has the biggest available sound sets in it. Some of them are specifically created for Dungeons and Dragons scenes. So there is an entire library of Curse of Strahd sound sets inside of Sirenscape, right? And it goes by scene. So if you are in the murder house, well, you pull up the scene for Murder House and it's got it room by room. I mean, you can't get much more detailed than that. The problem is it leaves a little bit less to the imagination, right? Because you're kind of playing a record that kind of goes with the book in a way.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. But they also have a great soundboard for things like screams, thunder strikes, creaking floorboards, babies crying, crows in the distance, explosions, all kinds of effective spells, weapon strikes, healing potions. They've got all those things.
And even things tied to certain creatures and monsters.
Yes.
Like they have canonic screams or growls from these monsters, which is really interesting.
Correct. The problem I find with Sirenscape, I find 2 problems primarily with Sirenscape, and it's one of the reasons I moved into another setup. And that setup might be a little bit simpler, but Sirenscape 1 has 2 different interfaces. There's a downloadable app that you can put on a device or on a computer, and then there is a web-based interface. They function very differently from one another, and the way you load in your sounds is not super intuitive. So I really feel like a lot of people out there could benefit from a good UX designer. This one's one of them. It's not bad, but it's not great. And for someone new to the table, there's a real serious learning curve to figuring this out. All of their training videos are made by the same person who I think is pretty effective. But like Rabbit.com said earlier in our comments, there's different types of brains out there. This guy's not training everybody to use this app. No way. My second criticism is I find it to be a little bit high priced in terms of the monthly you got to pay to be part of that. Now there is free versions, there's a lot in their free stuff. So definitely if you want to try it out, I would say try it out.
I believe it's about $14 a month.
I was paying about $14 a month. Yeah. That's what it was last time I checked.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But it does come with a lot. So, there is value there for your money. It just depends on what you want to do. So that's where I used to go for my music. There are lots of other great free places you can go. You can go to places like Spotify and find playlists that have just whole tracks of different types of moods.
YouTube itself has great ones for moods in different locations.
Correct. YouTube is a great resource. There's also things like there are soundboards out there that you can find that are, they're free. They're open source, so a lot of people are contributing to them. I don't have one off the top of my head, but if you Google Dungeons and Dragons or TTRPG soundboard, there are ones out there. So lots of resources for that.
Yeah.
But sound is critical. It's critical. So that's my shtick on that.
So what we've talked about so far is creating this physical space outside of the game table and even inside the game table with the candles and everything, to immerse people in this, terrifying thing happening in front of them, right? Let's talk more about your game itself. What mechanics in your game can raise the tension and, get people thinking about more than just whacking monsters, right?
Totally.
So I want to start off with Call of Cthulhu. In Call of Cthulhu, every player has their own sanity score. And throughout the game, the sanity score can be affected and subsequently lowered as the PCs encounter tragedies and horrors beyond their comprehension, right? So every time a PC encounters something that would affect their mental health, the GM rolls against the player's sanity score. And if that player fails the sanity roll, the fear takes over them, and the GM is able to take control of the PC for a moment, resulting in, let's say, a scream or maybe a squeeze of the trigger in that moment, which I think is super, super interesting because, it feels like your character is out of control for that second.
Right.
It's kind of like real life.
Well, the one thing we don't like more than anything when we're playing these games is when the GM kind of can affect you in a way that frightens you. No better way to do that than to become you, I would say. Mm-hmm. So I really like that mechanic a lot. I've seen other stress and anxiety counters in games before, and they may function like exhaustion, or they might function like some other mechanic where it's sort of like there's 5 levels, and for each level, there's a stacked kind of series of consequences. I think those are great.
Yeah.
So pull those into your game.
For sure. And then furthermore, as it goes on, your player will have to roll to see how they cope with this tragedy or horror, right? And if they pass the roll, that means they understood what happens and they go temporarily insane.
Oh, wow.
And this can have lasting effects on your character sheet. Let's say maybe something that used to be trusting about you is now fearful. And if you failed the roll, it means you failed to understand it and you are okay for the time being.
Oh my God. So that's an interesting flip on the fail and pass sort of scenario.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, easier to be dumber in that moment and just let it pass and whatever, not really comprehend what happened to you.
Brush it off.
Brush it off. Yeah.
Say, oh, what was that?
Yeah. That's so crazy.
Yeah, well, treat it like most people do and just deny it. Mm-hmm. Can you choose to deny it, or do you have to roll and have that enlightening moment?
I believe it's a roll to see how your character deals with that.
Gotcha.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Garret.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Garret.
Well, I was just going to say, Todd brought up a stress mechanic. I think, Rich, you were saying you did a little more research, but I think you said the Alien TTRPG had a stress mechanic.
Yeah. So in Alien, you, let's say you are going through a stressful moment, maybe running away from a xenomorph or something, right? And you want to make sure you pass this skill check coming up. You can choose to add stress to your character to add more dice, because that runs on a D6 system. So you can add more D6 to your roll. But however, the level at which your character is stressed will come back to bite you later on. And the GM can use that against you later on.
I think that a lot of these things, I love a lot of these things we're describing, but I think for them to really be effective, you need a real buy-in on the part of the player as well as the GM. The GM's really got to do a good job of describing, and this is going back to last week's conversation on immersion. You really got get your players invested through that immersive situation. And then a stress mechanic, a physical marker from the roll of a die that's going to set consequences for that character in motion. In order for that character to fully invest in that condition, it takes buy-in, right? So if all of a sudden I say to you, you're temporarily insane,
you got to play that.
You got to play that. You not only got to play that, you got to believe it.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to get there.
Yeah, agreed. And even let's say you don't have this necessity for buy-in at your game, or you don't want that. There's another mechanic from Vaesen, which is interesting.
Oh my God, I want to play Vaesen. That looks like a great game.
Yeah, Nordic horror is sick. But your characters can choose to overexert themselves in times of crisis, right? Because attributes are more of a pool of resources than they are a fixed bonus to rolls. You can push yourself kind of like an alien, but if you push too hard, it can result in, let's say, an accidental injury.
Right.
So let's say maybe you sprain your ankle. So you pass the skill check for a moment, but now you're limping around.
Gotcha. Now then, of course, that's probably going to affect other things involving dexterity or evasion or those types of moves. I don't know how Vaesen's mechanics work specifically, but I'm guessing, right?
That's exactly, yeah. Which, takes less buy-in and is just a more mechanical hindrance, which will increase stress.
Huh.
Yeah, but there's a repercussion to doing it.
Exactly.
So then inherently you have a just a sense of dread or something. Do I push myself because then
yeah,
it's gonna hurt me later?
People love complicated choices with consequences.
We'll have to pick that game up.
Yeah.
I immediately start thinking of movies like Midsommar and ones from that genre. I'm having trouble recalling some of the names. Was Let the Right One In? Was that Scandinavian horror?
I don't know. I know The Ritual was, if you ever saw The Ritual.
I didn't see The Ritual. I want to see The Ritual.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I would have to say that I think if you want to sort of prime your gears a little bit for a good horror campaign or setting the scene, watch a couple of these movies, right? And kind of and think about notions of physicality and sound and tension, because I think filmmaking, I think they have a larger hurdle to overcome when it comes to scaring their audience, because they really have the limitation of, here's the barrier of the screen. How am I going to get you there? Well, we all know that sound is a big one, right? Jump scares are usually accompanied by some kind of large sound and quick movement, but it still stops at the screen. So when I was doing some of the research for today's podcast, I started to look into some of storytelling's mechanisms for building tension or building suspense. One that I really liked, and I just want to stray off, the topic of some of these other TTRPGs for a second, because I still think some of these this is a mechanic. It just might not be one that is specific to a game, right? But one that I'm interested in is this notion of treating your location like an NPC, right? We can all relate to an NPC we had in a game that we fell in love with, right? And why did we fall in love with that person? Because they had a personality that we enjoyed, or they had a kind of an affect that we sort of connected with, or I don't know, they were silly.
Maybe it was just a name.
Maybe it was fuck.
Now we got to tell that story.
Sorry. Not sorry.
And this was my fault in a game that we played a long time ago. Circumstances just unfolded at a table too quickly for me to keep up. And they ran into this group of farmers. One of the farmers was telling a story to the party members, and somebody said, "Hey, what's the farmer's name?" And I did not have it on the tip of my tongue to keep with the pace. And so the first word that came out of my mouth, because I was upset with myself, not because I wanted to name the farmer this, but I just went, fuck. And someone said, "Farmer fuck." And so Farmer Fuck was born. And I mean, that's not very original, but it was kind of really funny to our game.
It stuck for the entire campaign. We kept talking about Farmer Fuck.
We did.
Waiting for him to come back.
We did. And he's an example of one of those beloved characters for whatever reason, as an NPC, we become invested in. Well, why? Well, we knew a lot of details about him. We were sort of part of the makeup of this guy, right? So what if you treated all of your world, or the room that you happen to be in, like that NPC? The room has a posture and a personality and an odor
and a feeling.
And you describe the way the room is dressed. What is it wearing? What is the texture of what it's wearing, right? So those sorts of things room or space or environment as NPC, I think can be very effective because now it becomes a character. Yeah. Characters are important. So that's the first thing. But the other thing I want to talk about here, because we're talking about how to get people more invested, especially in these mechanics where investment and immersion is part of the ability to do that, is trust. If your players have, trust is something that we strive for at the table in our session 0. So how do we create a scary situation? And I think somehow we have to tweak trust, because if people don't know what they can trust, they become afraid, right?
And then every little thing, they have this whole monologue in their mind, whether they can trust this thing or not. And it's scarier than it actually should be. Could be.
You said this thing about the scariest thing is not the thing. Remember?
It's the idea of the thing.
You said it's not the thing you can see, it's the thing you can't see.
Yeah.
Right? So tweaking trust in play. For example, when you drop clues to your players to, move them along through your various story beats, I mean, if some of those clues are red herrings, which are sort of meant to seem like one thing, but they're actually another thing, when it comes out that thing is entirely something they hadn't expected, well, now they're like, wait a minute, how much of the rest of this story is not what we think it is?
Yes. I mean, let's talk about just simple, relatable D&D moments, right? Let's say you didn't pick a lock, or you didn't test the lock before you went to open something. That time it exploded on you, right? Every time you go up to a lock from then on, you're freaking out.
You can't trust that lock.
No, you can't trust that lock. Not again.
Well, this is the whole point of a mimic. A mimic messes with the trust of a player. Always. It's like you see a wardrobe. I want to search oh, wait a minute. That could be a mimic.
Let me poke at my sword first.
Right. Right. That's kind of where this trust thing comes in. But there's a comical way to deal with trust where everything in this world is a mimic. Okay, that's going to be a problem for a horror campaign, right? I, as a DM, have I ever used a mimic in any of our games?
I don't think you've ever used a mimic.
Can you imagine if I pulled one out of my rear end right now in our game?
Sick.
You guys would lose your minds.
Yeah.
So I think part of this is dealing with the unexpected. If your players learn to trust you, it's because they know what to expect from you. Yeah. So to generate good horror, you have to go outside of your normal game. You got to get outside of your normal storytelling somehow. You got to introduce something you never introduced before. And people will be like, whoa, where did that come from? Okay, now I don't know what to expect. I get a little freaked out.
Yeah. I know also when it comes to just DMing or GMing, there's a tactic I use in my games because I love playing horror games. When anybody does something, right? They're like, all right, let me open this wardrobe or something. I take a beat, and instead of just being like, oh, nothing happens, I describe what they do. Okay, you reach out, you touch this doorknob, it's cold. It feels like it hasn't been touched in a long time. And you turn it and you feel the slow creak of the mechanisms inside, and you open it and it's empty.
Right. That was the pregnant pause, right? That was the pause that was filled with the tension.
Yeah.
Just before you say, and it's empty.
That's just as scary as being and you open it up and you're met with thousands of razor sharp teeth. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Todd's done that in our games before. Mm-hmm. There's been multiple times.
Yeah, and that's part of description, right? That's part of effective description. And, I always kind of was upset, years ago, I knew someone who could read a book faster than anyone I'd ever met in my life. And that was great for efficiency, but I think terrible for this kind of immersion, because I feel like even in writing, if you understand how a writer writes, you can feel those pauses sometimes, right? Not through physical spaces in the book, but you can just kind of feel the way a writer dances around the reveal a little bit to give it that much more energy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our job is here, is to sort of create that tension through that kind of pause, timing, the physicality of the space, the other things we set up, like music, and maybe we have a meal, maybe we set it up like a Gothic dining room. Maybe we have cobwebs on the ceiling. I would almost love it if, there was a big tablecloth on the table when everybody sat down that draped down to the floor and none of you knew it. But my 9-year-old was hiding under there the whole time and then all of a sudden grabbed one of your legs from underneath there an hour into the game.
My God.
I might kick your 9-year-old.
I know, that would be the problem, is now my kid's in the hospital. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think getting out of what the expectations are, get outside of those. Not break trust with your people, because you don't want this to be about something that's traumatic, but challenge that trust a little bit, just to bring them to the edge,
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, listen, I think this has been a great conversation today, and I'm actually really curious about bringing some. I want to bring candles into our game.
You have to. You have to.
10 candles sounds sick.
I think we've got to try that one out.
Maybe we'll do like a little one shot or something.
Yeah, should we do a video? We'll do
it
10
is
candles,
zero prep,
All right, I'm down with that. All right, everybody, listen, we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening to iCast Guidance. We are super excited. We got some episodes coming up in the near future. One based on a listener comment that wanted to hear about making puzzles and cryptic situations. We know that this is one of like the 3 arms of building your story is puzzles. And so we're going to do an entire episode on that. And we're bringing in Nathan Gilvey for that one because he is our math major in college and loves working out some of these situations. So I'm looking forward to that one. We got some other exciting stuff on the schedule coming for you. So stay tuned. Please tell your friends, and we'll see you all really soon.
Let's get spooky.
Spooky time.
Spooky time. All right, everybody. Take care. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to iCast Guidance. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix, Garret Brennan, and Rich Froman. We drop this podcast every week, and we are looking forward to having you hang out for more. Don't forget to head on over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, follow our channel, and definitely comment on what you see there. We will probably read those on this show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to next time.